Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today my tripod is broken. There we go. Alrighty, today we're gonna answer some more viewer questions sent in by you guys. And when I say that, I mean comments that I received on my videos. We've skipped a week, so I think it's time to start answering some more questions. And we'll start off by a very easy question. Alena asked me how I first got into orchids. Well, it's nothing spectacular. Like everybody else, I received an orchid and I liked it so much that I bought myself two more. And for whatever mysterious reason, I bought myself two white Phalaenopsis. And then I kind of inherited another white Phalaenopsis and I got a yellow Phalaenopsis. And from there I can say I got really hooked. The context was a little bit more complicated. I kind of wanted to prove a point and it was a sort of starting my life over again type of thing. So yeah, I decided, hey, I'm gonna start over with a bunch of orchids because why not? Why not? So I bought a bunch of them one day. Dendrobiums, Oncidiums, so on. I spent almost a year on a forum learning about them, and then I made a YouTube channel because why not? So yeah, as you can see, very typical story. Evelina is saying she bought an Oncidium orchid which somehow ended up without roots and the bulbs are shriveling. She doesn't really know what to do. I realize this is a bit late of a response, but check the description down below. I'll link you to a video called How to Promote New Growth or New Roots or something of the sorts on orchids. I'll give you the gist of things. Pretty much you kind of need to keep the base of the orchid in a humid area. And by base, I mean the base of the pseudobulbs. Don't bury it anywhere, but I find that if you can maintain a moist layer on top of your pot, that will make sure that the new roots, the root tips that start to emerge, they continue to grow. If it's very dry, the air around them, sometimes they just stop, and that's no good. So if you have some sphagnum moss, that can work as well. I did make a video yesterday on some orchids that I keep in little jars with a bit of medium and some water and so on. I'll add that video down below as well. Pretty much I would try to maintain humidity around the base. Depending on the Oncidiums, they will start to produce roots. They're not very finicky orchids. The shriveling of the pseudobulbs, well, that's to be expected. There's nothing you can do about it. As long as we don't have roots to hydrate the orchid, the pseudobulbs will be shriveled, but they do plump back up. They will never be shiny, glossy and nice, but they will plump up, don't worry, when roots start to appear. Maybe I should make a sort of beginner guide to this, what to do with a rootless orchid. I kind of always discussed about it. I just don't think I have a proper video on it with some easy to follow points. So let me know down below if you think I should do this, if I have such a video, because at this point, you know, I have 1,500 videos in my collection and I don't remember. But you know, for the sake of updating stuff, I might just do that. Let me know if that's something you think will be useful. Govin is asking, how do we provide calcium to Paps in semi-hydroponics and what Paps need extra calcium? Well, there used to be this website which had this information nicely presented. I linked to it a million years ago. Sadly, the site is not up anymore. I'll try to find this information once again on the internet because I really am not the expert on Paps. I don't have them on the top of my head. I know that the Insigni actually requires supplemental calcium, or at least on a regular basis, but to be fairly honest, I do provide calcium to all of my Paps on a regular basis, and there's really no trick to it. I do have calcium in my MSU fertilizer, and I use fertilized water just like it will be a normal watering. The fertilizer will remain in the reservoir, and that's okay. The orchids will pick it up, including the calcium, but if you want to provide separate calcium to some Paphiopedilums, you can always go for calcium nitrate. If I'm not mistaken, you can find it for sale on Amazon, eBay, or shops in general. If you don't want to hassle with that, just choose a fertilizer which contains calcium and just follow the instructions. There's really no trick to fertilizing in semi-hydroponics. I just use the fertilized water. Whatever remains in the reservoir remains in the reservoir, and that's okay. Alrighty, Hamster Trails asks why their Phalaenopsis, even though healthy, grows a basal cake instead of a leaf or a flower spike during her growing season. Does this mean there is something actually wrong with the orchid? And my answer will have to be no. Phalaenopsis and other orchids don't produce keikis only when they're stressed. It is a means of propagation. It might not be as efficient as producing seeds, therefore they don't do it all that often. But genetically, from time to time, they do produce keikis in nature as well. As you might know, they can produce keikis from the flower spike or basal keikis. That works as well, and it is true that when an orchid loses her crown, it will be a lot more prone to produce keikis. But if the orchid looks healthy and she decides, well, I'm gonna produce a keiki every once in 6 years, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean anything. Naturally, orchids can do that. There are indeed hybrids in cultivation which seem to overproduce keikis, and there we can talk about a genetic anomaly perhaps, maybe due to hybridization. But if the keiki production doesn't impair the health of the orchid, and it doesn't happen very often, then there's nothing to worry about. Orchids do that naturally. Even species, even in nature, from time to time, they produce a little baby, a little clone of themselves. I think I did talk about this in a very old video. Why would orchids like to clone themselves in nature? Simple. Maybe it's just such a strong individual, maybe it's old, it passed the test of time, the test of the elements, the test of the pests. Why not clone themselves, right? So evolutionary speaking, I don't think it's far-fetched for plants to clone themselves when they feel they are strong. And if we think about other plants which tend to root if the stem is cut and just lands on the ground, you know, it makes sense, but we're kind of deviating from the subject, aren't we? Don't worry if your orchid produces keikis from time to time, as long as it doesn't drain too much energy from the orchid too often, everything is okay. Don't worry. Christy is asking if she can grow her Phalaenopsis orchid in a clear plastic bucket, maybe pot or maybe container filled with glass balls. And the reason is she doesn't really want to complicate with medium that can cause problems such as bark and sphagnum moss, and by problems I mean decomposition, perhaps. And she still wants to provide the orchid water, oxygen and indirect light. Well, I said this before in a video. Really, honestly, it doesn't really matter what type of medium you choose as long as the orchid does indeed receive water and air, and the ratio between water and air is appropriate. That's really important as well, because you can give water, air, but if you don't give them in the proper ratio, you know, you're not gonna have a good time. Therefore, you have to make sure that the ratio is easily maintained as well. Now, let me tell you what the problem with the glass beads is. It's not the material, it's not the shape, it's not that it suffocates roots. In essence, it is pretty much like leca. We have the spaces in between. Problem is the ratio. Because the difference between glass and leca, which is expanded clay, is the capillary property or action. Leca absorbs water from the reservoir and directs it up, because that's just the nature of the material. It is porous, it's absorbent. Glass is a very polished thing. It doesn't have pores and it doesn't have any capillary action other than surface tension to a certain degree. So the problem will be the upper layer being very kind of dry and the lower layer being very kind of moist. At some point within the pot you will have that Goldilocks ratio, but further up I doubt it. Further down, you know, yet again, you might have a reservoir that stays there for way too long, and that depends on the environment as well. If it's gonna work with your environment, if it's dry and hot, you know, it might work. If it's not dry and hot, it might not work. There are many variables you kind of need to think about. In essence, whatever you can think of to grow your orchids in, you can, if you provide air and water, and that thing is not toxic to the orchid. However, though, you have to think about the ratio. That's the problem with the glass beads. You can use it, you can try it. I think it will be fun. If you don't have 200 orchids like me, by all means do it, because you'll have time to water, to pay attention to the orchid. But you know, somebody like me with 250 orchids, which tends to look like Flash when she waters, you know, the glass is not a good option for me. I don't use it. I'm not interested in it because already I know it's not gonna work. But there you go. Hopefully I kind of answered your question. I feel like I've talked too much. Let's move on. Alrighty, the next question comes from Vlog Diaries, and I realize again this is a little bit too late. I'm so sorry for the late response, but hopefully it's not too late. They're asking about a dendrobium which they purchased with an existing cane, and the dendrobium grew 2 more canes, and now that it's autumn, or it used to be autumn, the dendrobium started to produce another new growth. And the question is, do we winter rest or don't we winter rest? I'll tell you what you can do. You can do a compromise until your orchid becomes established to your environment. Now, it's not a good idea to completely cut watering, because that new growth, that will continue to suck energy from the new plant, from the mother plant. So no watering is out of the question. However, you can do something. Don't fertilize. Well, let me tell you why I'm saying that. That new growth has great chances not to develop nicely because it's winter, we don't have long days, we don't probably have a lot of sun, and so on. That new growth will stop at some point and the orchid will produce another new growth during next year. So yet again, you're gonna end up with two growths. Now, I'm saying don't fertilize it because you might actually avoid vegetative growth and pretty much sacrifice the new growth. That's okay if you sacrifice it. I promise you the orchid will produce other new growths, maybe in the spring. I actually do have an example, not this one. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm not gonna get the orchid out because it's behind the vandas and I kind of have to demolish stuff. But last year in summertime, I think, or late spring, I purchased a Dendrobium nobile from Anna Maria. It's the yellow canary one, or yellow carnival. Anyway, it's a yellow type of nobile. You can see it developed two growths, it matured two growths. However, though, this thing is coming from Romania. And just like my other dendrobiums that came both from Romania, they needed time to adapt to my new environment. And they grew two sets of canes in 1 year because of the extended summer. Now, this guy did the very same thing. Do we see what's going on at the base there? We have a new growth just growing. However, though, what I did was not encourage it because I knew the new growth probably will not grow very fast. It might be kind of flimsy. This orchid will produce other new growths in the springtime, and I'm trying to season it kind of in a way as well. That sounded culinary. Okay, not season. I'm trying to adapt it, right, to my environment. So I didn't fertilize this orchid, and the outcome was that there we go. We do have some nubbins. There you go, there you go. So this orchid will produce some flowers, maybe not a whole lot of flowers. It will kind of grow the new growth as well, but not at a very fast rate. If the new growth decides she wants to grow faster in the springtime, by all means, I have no problem. But until then, she is not getting fertilizer. And by not offering fertilizer, but still watering, because I still water this orchid, I'm kind of getting a little bit of both worlds. Then start to fertilize, at the end of winter or somewhere in February, and start to focus on that new growth if the orchid doesn't want to bloom anyway. But I hope it does, I hope it works out, and I hope this helped you. Alrighty, Suez, I'm pretty sure I'm butchering the name, I'm sorry. Anyway, they're asking if bark can be used in semi-hydroponics, and the answer is a very strong no. Bark will affect the water, bark will degrade, it is absolutely not suited, and from the point of view of mechanics, it doesn't have very strong capillary properties in the sense that it will not drag the water from the reservoir to the top. And to top it all off, if you maintain bark in water pretty much at all times like a reservoir, it will start to decompose and go bad faster than you can say, oh no. Furthermore, it doesn't have a round shape, so the whole situation with 40-30% air inside the pot will instantly not be the case because bark has different types of shapes. It will kind of compact on each other, and even though it will have air pockets, it will not be all that much. So in the end, the bark will become mush, will start to suffocate the roots, will leach out tannins, will leach out other stuff due to decomposition and so on. So the answer is no, you cannot use bark for proper semi-hydroponics. You can use bark in something similar, but it will not work as the system is intended, and I personally doubt you'll have a good time. Alrighty guys, that will have to be all for today. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have questions, leave them down below in a comment. I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I received. And you know the drill, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Now that's it, I'll see you all next time. Bye!